What else would you draw our attention to?
Very quickly, face covering is already mandatory in shops and on transport. Museums, cinemas, places of worship, galleries are all going to be included within that list from August the 8th. So if you visit one of those places, you're going to have to wear a face mask. Just on weddings of up to 30 people, they're not going to be able to take place. That's going to be postponed, of course, for 2 weeks. There have been plans to open, you said, casinos, bowling alleys and ice rinks. If you're planning to do that with the kids over for the remainder of the summer holidays, you're not going to be able to. But the government, interestingly, is sticking with its advice of giving employers discretion about asking employees to return to work, and shielding advice, which, of course, was announced a couple of weeks ago that is going to change from tomorrow. So shielding ends tomorrow, and employers will be able to use their discretion and ask employees to come back to work. Interestingly, there was a gap there, wasn't there, between what Chris Whitty said and what Boris Johnson said. The Prime Minister saying it was absolutely imperative that employers were given that right to get their staff back into the workplaces if they could make their places of work COVID secure. Chris Whitty, on the other hand, didn't say that.
A good spot, this.
Chris Whitty said, well, we think employers have done a lot of work to try and make their places, their factories and shop floors and offices COVID safe. There is a gap there between the advice, and we know, of course, what Sir Patrick Vallance.
Did he not also use the language was key here as well? Was that on a separate point?
Well, that was on schools.
Yes, so when he said ministers.
Yes, he said
previously
ministers.
He would have said we.
We. So
great spot. Great spot.
Previously, Chris Whitty, as the chief medical officer, would use the term would say we, because he'd be referring to the ministers and the scientists. Interesting there in his body language and the way he used the way he spoke, that he talked about ministers on the one hand having to make the decision and scientists advising. And of course, Boris Johnson, Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary, previously presented the reopening of schools August the 11th for Scotland, and of course full reopening of schools in September for England as a slam dunk certainty. This is going to happen. Now saying it's a priority for the government to make sure that it happens. So of course the implication is that with the R rate ticking up, that we could end up in a situation where schools do not reopen fully in September.
No, those numbers, 63% I think it breaks down to as the increase from 3,000 to 4,900.
Yes. So those are new. Those are the new infections. As you were saying, the R rate.
Serious, isn't it?
So the R rate is not necessarily the best one to look at.
Let me explain why, because this is really interesting. Someone else explained it to me. If only one person in the country had COVID-19 at the moment, and then they infected 10 others, then in a sense the R rate would become 10. But only actually one, and then 11 people have got it. So it's interesting, and it's higher than it was during lockdown, but that doesn't actually deliver quite the punch that some people presume. It's the number of infections, and the number of infections will be slightly skewed by the increasing in testing. You know, obviously that's a good thing, but